The rain that night felt like a judgment. I stood in front of the door of the house that used to be where I knitted dreams. But now it was just a foreign building with a key that had been replaced by someone else. Andre, the man who used to swear to protect me, has just won everything through a cold judge's ruling. The house, the car, and most of all custody of our children. I only had a worn suitcase, clothes attached to my body, and a brown envelope containing the rest of my savings. Exactly $300. In the middle of the rain, I sat at an empty bus stop. It felt like there was a black hole in my chest, sucking up all the oxygen that was left. I had no destination, no more routine of dropping off the school children, and no more the sound of their laughter in the living room. I don't have anything else, I whispered to myself. My voice was hoarse, drowned out by the sound of rain dripping against the roof of the bus stop. As my hand reached into my coat pocket to find a dead phone that had run out of battery, my finger touched something hard and rough in texture. Grandma's old recipe book. The book was already yellow, full of sauce stains and hand notes that were starting to fade. In the past, I often ignored this book because I was busy with the luxurious lifestyle that Andre provided. Now, books are the only valuable asset I have. Grandma always said that cooking is the most honest language of love. If the world doesn't give me a place to talk, let the food tell the story. The words swirled in my head, providing a hint of warmth amid the freezing night air. I stared at the $300 bill. For some people, the money may only be enough to pay for a week's meals. However, for me, this is a capital not to starve, or a choice to rebuild the scattered debris of my life. I chose the second option. I won't let Andre see me crumble into dust. I had to get up, even if it was just with a folding table on the side of the road. The next morning, I woke up with a stiff body in the waiting room of a cheap inn. I immediately rushed to the second-hand market. Carefully, I spent my money. I bought a folding table, a compact portable gas stove, some basic cooking utensils, and high-quality fresh ingredients. I had little money left, even almost used up for transportation costs to a strategic location on the side of the highway that was crowded with office workers. I started practicing Grandma's secret recipe. This recipe is a modified grilled meat sauce recipe with spices that are not commonly found in regular eateries. The aroma is very distinctive, sharp yet soothing. As soon as I started heating up the first dish, the scent instantly spread into the air, provoking the curiosity of everyone who passed by. A man in a neat shirt stopped in front of my desk. He seemed to be in a hurry, but the smell of my cooking seemed to stop him. He ordered a portion. As he took a bite of the first bite, his eyes widened slightly. It was a genuine expression of satisfaction. She paid more than I offered, and said that the taste of this cuisine reminded her of her mother's cooking. I felt something stirring inside me. It was not just money that he gave, but recognition. For the first time after that devastating divorce, I felt like I had a purpose. I am no longer just a wasted wife. I am Mary, someone who has skills and values. The sun began to rise high, and small lines began to form in front of my desk. Primetta worked fast, my hands moving with a rhythm I hadn't used in a long time. Every serving sold gave me a breath to keep going. I learned that managing a small business is much more challenging than managing a large household, but satisfaction is different. When night fell, I calculated my first day's income. The number far exceeded my expectations. That figure is enough to cover the capital of raw materials tomorrow and a small set aside for emergency savings. I sat on the edge of the bed in that cheap inn, staring at Grandma's recipe book that opened in my lap. Andre probably thinks he's ruined me. He may be sure that I will beg him to come back or live languishing in poverty. However, he was very wrong. Today, I learned that strength does not come from treasures that can be snatched away, but from the desire to keep going, even in the most difficult circumstances. I closed my eyes, thinking about plans for tomorrow. I will look for a better location, increase the variety of menus, and improve the service. I knew this journey would be very long and full of obstacles. There are times when I get tired, when I want to give up, and maybe when Andre comes back to look down on me. However, I have already made up my mind. I will rebuild my universe, piece by piece, until I become a much stronger and more resilient version of myself than before. Those $300 have now turned into seeds. I will shower it with sweat and dedication. Tomorrow, I'll be back on that street with my head held high. Andre will no longer be the center of my life, because now the center of my life is myself and the dream I just started from an old folding table. I will no longer be a victim of someone else's story, but the author of my own life story. The sun had just appeared when I was already on site. The morning air was still cold, but my spirits were much warmer than the previous nights. Armed with the first day's income, I bought more fresh ingredients at the parent market. I no longer feel like a stranger on this side of the road. The folding table that yesterday looked fragile, today feels like the main stage where I show my skills. The smell of the scorched spices began to dance in the air, mixed with the aroma of coffee from the shop across the street. This is the fragrance of struggle. I saw people passing by, mostly office workers who looked tired before the day actually started. They need something real, something that isn't just flavorless fast food. I make sure every portion I serve is of the same quality as the cuisine in a fancy restaurant. The time shows 8 o'clock in the morning. Customers are starting to arrive. The man who came back yesterday with a coworker. They ordered 2 portions. Seeing them sitting on small plastic chairs while enjoying my food voraciously made my chest feel tight with emotion. I no longer thought about Andre or the magnificent house he now occupies. My mind is completely focused on the balance of taste and speed of service. However, managing a roadside business is not as easy as turning the palm of your hand. I had to deal with strong winds that sometimes made my business banner come off, as well as street dust that required me to always be alert to keep the cooking area clean. I learned to place each sauce bottle and utensils in the most efficient position. Every second is precious. I can't waste time just looking for a spoon or napkin. In the midst of my busy life, a middle-aged woman approached me. He watched the way I cooked with a sharp gaze. I was anxious, afraid that he was a health inspector or someone who would reprimand me for selling on the sidewalk. Apparently, he was the owner of a small food stall on the next block. She just wanted to know what made the line at my desk longer than hers. I smiled politely. I don't think of him as a rival, but rather as a fellow fighter on the street. I gave him a few samples of my dishes to taste. His face changed after tasting one mouthful. She admits that Grandma's recipe does have something different. We talked briefly about the challenges of selling in this region. He gave me advice on how to store raw materials to keep them fresh for longer without having to have an expensive refrigerator. The conversation made me realize that I wasn't alone. Many people around here are also struggling to survive. This world is not only made up of betrayals like Andre did, but also of small, unfathomable kindness. My confidence slowly started to grow back. By noon, my cooking ingredients were almost gone. I had to learn to manage the stock more carefully. If there are too many, the material will be wasted. If it's too few, I lose customers who come late. I started jotting down every input from customers in Grandma's booklet. I noted who likes spicy, who avoids onions, and what types of sauces sell the fastest. This simple data became my secret weapon. As I tidied up the table to close the sale, I felt like my body was very tired. My legs felt throbbing, and my fingers began to callous from continuing to cut vegetables. However, in my heart, I felt very light. The money collected today is enough to buy a supply of raw materials tomorrow and add a little capital to buy additional chairs. I walked towards the inn with a steadier pace than yesterday. I no longer looked down when I passed people on the street. I felt like I had a new identity. Mary is no longer just the name of a rich man's. Mary is a culinary entrepreneur who is pioneering the future. When I arrived at the room, I didn't immediately fall asleep. I opened Grandma's recipe book and started planning the menu for the next week. I want to try a more challenging variation of the recipe. I want to make sure that everyone who buys my food will come back, not because they have to, but because they really like it. I stared at the mirror in the corner of the room. My face looked a little dull from the street dust, but my eyes shone brightly. I saw the reflection of a woman who was ready for any storm. Andre probably thought he had erased my existence from his world. In fact, it was he who forced me to break out of my comfort zone and discover the potential that had been buried deeply. That night, I slept soundly. I no longer think about the lost house or car. All of them are inanimate objects. The real treasure I have now is Grandma's recipe and determination that cannot be pawned. Tomorrow is a new day, and I couldn't wait to get back to that folding table, cook with all my heart, and keep moving forward without looking back. Life had just begun, and this time I was in complete control of its direction. Every drop of sweat that falls today is an investment for the future that I am building myself. I know this is just the beginning, but I'm sure that I'm on the right path. Entering the 3rd week, I started to get used to the rhythm of the streets. My folding table that originally looked dull is now covered with a brightly colored clean cloth to make it look more inviting. I also had a fixed schedule to leave before the sun actually came out and close the stalls when the last supplies were sold out. However, the real challenge is not physical fatigue, but maintaining the consistency of taste so that customers don't get bored. That morning, the weather was a little cloudy. I was arranging the containers of spices when a young man in a courier uniform stopped in front of me. His face looked wrinkled, as if today had gone badly for him. He ordered my signature menu with a flat tone, almost devoid of emotion. I greeted him with a friendly smile that had become part of my ministry. As I served him a plate of food that was still steaming, he was silent for a moment. He feeds the food slowly. The change in his facial expression was clearly visible. The wrinkles on his forehead that were originally visible and slowly softened. He doesn't just eat to be full, but to calm down. Before leaving, he looked at me and said that this dish was the only good thing he had felt all day. That simple moment made me realize the power of Grandma's recipe. As it turns out, food is not just carbohydrates and proteins. For people who are struggling out there, a plate of food cooked with sincerity can be I feel more than just a food vendor. I am part of the encouragement of their day. Of course, not all days go smoothly. That afternoon, a man in a neat suit stopped near my stall. He didn't order, but stood there talking through his cell phone in a loud voice. He complained about the location of my folding table, which he considered to interfere with the aesthetics of the sidewalk in front of his office building. He threatened to report to the public order authorities if I didn't move immediately. My heart was pounding. The fear of losing their only source of income suddenly appeared. If I was kicked out of this location, I would have to start from scratch again, in a place that wasn't necessarily crowded. However, I took a deep breath. I no longer let fear dominate my mind like I did when I faced Andre. I approached him calmly after he finished calling. I don't ask for mercy. Instead, I offered him a portion of my cooking as a form of introduction. At first, she cynically refused. But after I emphasized that I was just a woman building a life independently, she finally gave up and tasted it. As it turns out, he is a building operations manager who really appreciates hard work. He didn't evict me, even allowing me to continue selling as long as I kept the surrounding area strictly clean. That incident taught me valuable lessons about negotiation and courage. I learned that the bargaining position can be improved with a professional attitude and product quality that cannot be underestimated. I started investing in a small trash can and made sure there were no oil spills on the sidewalk. I want people to see that small business is not synonymous with chaos. Every night, I returned to the inn, feeling more confident. I started counting the numbers in my notebook. This month's income has far exceeded the initial $300 I had. I started to set aside some of the profits into a special envelope for an emergency fund and business development capital. I even started thinking about buying a stove with 2 stoves so I could cook faster. I also began to dare to experiment with other recipes in Grandma's book. I tried to combine traditional spices with a more modern presentation. The customer response has been overwhelmingly positive. The line in front of my folding table is getting longer every day. The name Mary is slowly becoming known around this office area as a provider of delicious and honest food. When night falls, I often stare at photos of my children stored on my phone. The longing is always there, and sometimes it still hurts. However, now that longing has turned into fuel. I knew that someday I would have enough money to fight to get them back legally. I will have a strong financial position to prove that I am a mother who is able to provide them with a decent future. I closed Grandma's recipe book with a peaceful heart. This folding table is no longer just a survival tool. This is the foundation of a small kingdom that I am building. Every serving I serve is a declaration that I am still persevering, I am still fighting, and I am still worthy of happiness. Andre may think I'm over, but in reality, it's the beginning of the greatest chapter of my life. I'm ready for tomorrow's challenge, with a hotter stove and a much more burning spirit. Entering the 4th month, my folding desk business is no longer just an escape from pain, but the pulse of my life. However, business growth brings challenges I never imagined before. I no longer just deal with fatigue, but with increasingly complicated logistics. The increased profits required me to professionalize, and this forced me out of the comfort zone I had just built. The main problem is the kitchen. All this time I was cooking in the cramped room of an inn that was not suitable for a larger scale of production. Cooking smoke began to trigger complaints from inn owners, and fire safety risks became a real threat. I realized if I wanted to survive and continue to grow, I had to have a commercial kitchen. I started hunting for rental places. Property prices in this city are very high, especially for strategic locations. I spent days visiting small warehouses and abandoned business spaces. Many places I turned down because the rental fee would eat up more than half of my monthly profit. I must carefully calculate. If I make a wrong step in investing, I can get back to zero in an instant. In the middle of the search, I meet an old bakery owner who is about to close due to retirement. The location is not very large, but it has kitchen appliances that are still in good working order, including a large oven and an adequate ventilation system. He offered a reasonable price, but I still had to spend months on the savings I had accumulated so hard. A big dilemma is coming to me. If I take this place, my savings will be drained almost entirely. I will again have very little money in the account. It feels like repeating the mistakes of the past, risking everything on one chance. However, my instincts say otherwise. Without a proper kitchen, my business will be stagnant. I won't be able to meet the growing demand of customers. Finally, with trembling hands, I signed a lease. Once the kitchen key was in my hands, a new struggle began. I had to move all the equipment to a new location, and make minor repairs to match my hygiene standards. I worked through the night, washing tiles, painting walls, and rearranging the stove layout to make my workflow more efficient. Every corner of this kitchen feels like a promise of a better future. However, managing your own kitchen also means inflated operational costs. Electricity, water, gas, and cleaning levies are now routine bills that I have to pay. The pressure to keep selling food in high volumes is very real. If it's raining today and the customers are quiet, I still have to pay the kitchen rent. That anxiety came to mind, reminding me of the early days when I only had $300. Am I able to bear this burden? I overcome it by working twice as hard. I started offering a pre-order system for large orders, such as for office events around the sales area. I designed a simple business card and distributed it to every satisfied customer. I also started to standardize grandma's recipes. I record the amount of spices down to the smallest gram so that the taste is always consistent, no matter who cooks it. One morning, in the second week of occupying the new kitchen, I felt very tired. My sleep hours are erratic. Sometimes I fall asleep on the kitchen floor only to wake up 2 hours later to start the meat marinade process. My body felt crushed, and there were times when I just wanted to cry because I missed my children who felt so far away. Andre may have thought that living on the streets would make me give up, but he didn't know that the pain of losing children was a never-ending fuel. I tried to calm myself down by rereading Grandma's recipe book. On the last page, Grandma wrote a small note. Success is not about how fast you get to the top, but how firm you stand when a storm tries to knock down your foundation. That sentence became an anchor for my thoughts. I started implementing a stricter time management strategy. I divide my days into blocks of activities: mornings for sales, days for evaluation and stocking, and evenings for researching. No menus. I also started investing in more durable equipment, even though it costs more, because I knew that efficiency was the key to sustainability. These changes are starting to bear fruit. Customers began to notice that the quality of my cuisine was getting more stable. The queue at my folding table is no longer just a sight, but a routine that people look forward to. I started getting regular orders from some of the big companies around here. This is a huge leap that I never imagined happening in such a short period of time. Of course, there are technical obstacles. The old oven in the new kitchen had broken down, and I had to incur unexpected expenses for service. I had panicked, but I had learned not to let emotions trump logic. I fix what can be fixed, and look for alternative solutions to what can't be addressed right away. That night, as I stood in the middle of the kitchen that was starting to be neatly organized, I realized something. I no longer feel afraid of the future. I've gone from the abandoned by Andre phase to the building my own life phase. This kitchen is not just a place to cook, it is my fortress of defense. Every rupiah I earn is clear proof that I am able to stand on my own feet. I am no longer the woman crying at the bus stop. I am an entrepreneur who is building his own path, and I am just getting started. The next round will be much more challenging, but I'm ready to face it with my head held high. Entering the 7th month, the wheels of my business are spinning faster than I ever imagined. My business name is starting to be known as a new standard for quality food in the office area. However, behind that small success, a larger vision began to grow in my head. I don't want to be forever limited to one sidewalk point that depends on the weather and the permission of the building owner. I need mobility. I need a food truck. Having a food truck will change everything. I can reach a wider area, move from one crowded center to another, and no longer be trapped by the physical limitations of a building. However, when I started researching the price of a used food truck, the numbers displayed on the computer screen made my guts shrink. The price is fantastic, far exceeding the savings I've built up over the past 7 months. That's tens of times the amount of money I had left when I started this journey. That impossibility had made me pessimistic. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the truck's price list I had printed, and felt like someone trying to move a mountain with a teaspoon. Thoughts about Andre flared up again. In the past, if I wanted something expensive, I just had to ask for it. Andre would buy it with a contemptuous attitude, as if I was a show doll in need of a new toy. Now, I had to buy it with my own sweat, and it felt a lot heavier. I closed my eyes, trying to dismiss the shadows of the past. I don't need Andre's mercy. I need a strategy. I began to dissect my business cash flow more carefully. I realized that even though my sales were selling, my profit margins were still eroded by high operating costs. I had to cut costs without compromising quality in this. I started doing massive efficiency. I am looking for a supplier of raw materials directly from local farmers to keep prices down without lowering the freshness of vegetables and meat. I also started to redesign the menu so that the ingredients used could be more flexible and less wasted. Every penny I managed to save, I put into a special account that I labeled Dreams on Wheels. However, challenges don't come alone. In the midst of my efforts to raise capital, The kitchen I rented experienced a serious drainage system problem. The owner of the building took off his hands and demanded that I fix it myself at a considerable cost. Panic had hit. The money that I was supposed to use to pay off my dream of a food truck is in danger of being used up for pipe repairs. I almost gave up. I felt as if the universe was testing me in an unfair way. But then I remembered my children. I can't stop now. If I stop, I will still be a woman who is defeated by circumstances. I forced myself to find an honest plumber and did it by the most economical method. I intervened myself, helping to dig and clean the ducts, even though it made me incredibly exhausted. The struggle paid off. The waterways returned to normal, and I didn't lose as much capital as I feared. This moment taught me a lesson about resilience. I realized that financial constraints are not dead walls, but puzzles that must be solved with creativity. On the sidelines of being busy, I started to be active on social media. I not only upload photos of food, but also share behind-the-scenes stories. I told her about Grandma's recipe book, about the struggle of opening my own kitchen, and about my dream of owning a food truck. The response I got was unexpected. People started supporting me, not just as a buyer, but as a community. They provide location suggestions, share experiences, and some even offer small investments with a profit-sharing system. I wasn't ready to accept a huge investment yet because I wanted to keep full control, but this attention gave me new energy. I began to realize that my vision of a food truck was no longer an impossible dream. It is a long-term project that is starting to have a real foundation. One night, I sat at a clean kitchen table, recounting my savings. The number is still far from the target, but the growth is consistent. I saw my reflection in the blurry window. My face looked more defined. There was a noticeable line of fatigue under my eyes, but the look in my eyes showed an independence that money couldn't buy. I wrote a strategic plan on a white chalkboard that I pasted on the kitchen wall. I divided it into small phases. Phase 1, income stabilization. Phase 2, supply chain optimization. Phase 3, diversification of locations. By breaking down big dreams into small, achievable goals, the heavy burden feels lighter. Andre probably thinks he's ruined my life. He might be underestimating my ability to survive without his financial support. However, every day I proved him wrong. I no longer needed the grand house or luxury car he once took. I was building something much more valuable, a deep-rooted independence. I ended the night by writing a journal. I record all the obstacles I have overcome today, as a reminder that there is no success that does not begin with pain. Tomorrow will be a long day. I have to prepare orders for 3 offices at once. But I don't mind. This fatigue felt sweet, because I knew every drop of sweat brought the food truck one step closer to my grasp. I no longer walk alone. I carry a dream and determination that will change my life forever. I'm ready to welcome tomorrow with a triumphant smile. Entering the 8th month, physical fatigue began to become my best friend. However, that morning the air felt different. An email landed in my inbox, inviting me to appear in a culinary segment on one of the national television stations. They heard about the story of a woman who built a business from scratch on the side of the road and wanted to raise her story as an inspiration for the audience at home. My hands trembled as I replied to the confirmation. This is a golden opportunity that I never dared to imagine before. Preparation for the performance was very time-consuming. I have to make sure the quality of the dishes is absolutely perfect because millions of pairs of eyes will see the process. I also prepared myself to tell my story without having to look sad. I want them to see a woman who rises, not a woman who is down. On the day of the shooting, the television crew came to my kitchen. Cameras, floodlights, and rows of cables make the usually quiet room suddenly feel like a theater stage. I cooked quietly, following the instincts that had been honed by the thousands of servings I had sold for months. Grandma must have been proud to see me here, using her recipe book as the center of this whole series of stories. The television host was very friendly. He dug up the story of why I started this business. Honestly, I told him about my lowest point, about how I had to lose everything, and how the folding table on the side of the road was the only place I could get a foothold. As the camera zoomed in on my face up close, I saw my reflection in the camera lens. I don't see the woman crying at the bus stop anymore. I saw a tough businessman. That night, the broadcast aired. I sat alone in the kitchen, watching myself on the television screen. I felt proud, but there was a sudden sense of anxiety. What if Andre watches this? What if he feels bothered by my honest story about our marriage failure? That thought had made me indecisive. However, when I saw the comment column on the television station's social media, my fear faded. Hundreds of people wrote in support, saying that my story inspired them not to give up on fate. The peak occurred 2 days after the broadcast aired. I was serving an unusually long line. The effect of the television broadcast was multiplying. My customers swam, A luxury car pulled up in front of the pavement. I recognized the car. My heart felt like it had stopped beating. The car door opens, and Andre comes out in a suit that looks very expensive. He stood there, observing my movements with a look that was difficult to decipher. The atmosphere around my folding table was suddenly silent. The customers looked curious, some whispering to each other. I tried to stay calm, even though my hands were starting to feel cold. Andre walked over, past the long line. He stood right in front of me, looking at my folding table with a familiar, contemptuous look. "So, this is all the result of your escape?" he asked in a piercingly cold tone. He did not greet her, nor did she ask how she was doing. He immediately attacked with a cynicism that had been his weapon to bring me down. I stopped cutting the meat, then looked him right in the eye. I didn't look down, nor did I tremble. "This is the result of my hard work, Andre. And this is mine completely. Something you can't take or break anymore," I replied in a voice that was firm and loud enough for people around to hear. Andre chuckled, a condescending laugh. He looked around, then looked back at me. "You think by appearing on TV you have become someone? You're just a woman selling on dirty streets. You'll be tired of all this in a month." His words sparked a great turmoil in me. However, instead of exploding in anger, I felt a strange calm. I realized that Andre couldn't see the value of what I was doing because his heart was already blinded by pride. He doesn't look at business. He only looks at status. And for someone who only worships status, independence is a scary thing. "In that case, please go, Andre. You're annoying my customers," I said as I returned to focus on my work. I deliberately ignored him, treating him as if he was just meaningless street dust. The action made his face flush with anger. He was used to controlling my emotions, used to seeing me destroyed. Seeing me indifferent was the biggest defeat for him. He was silent for a moment, trying to find other sharp words, but I didn't care anymore. I presented the customer's order in front of him, smiled at the customer, and made sure he got the best service. Andre finally left, with a very visible, annoyed look. His luxury car sped away, leaving dust stuck to my shoes. Some customers who were silent earlier are now cheering small. They supported me. They see who actually deserves respect here. That night, after everyone had gone home and the kitchen was quiet again, I cried. Not crying out of hurt, but out of relief. I just faced my biggest fear, and I won. I realized that this conflict was not just about divorce, but about breaking the bonds that had been binding my soul. Andre has no power over me anymore. I am the author of my own life. And today's chapter proves that I will never let anyone else take away my dreams. I closed Grandma's recipe book, took a deep breath, and was ready to face whatever happened next. I'm not afraid anymore. After the confrontation with Andre at the folding table, my mood experienced great ups and downs. I had felt very empowered because I managed to drive him away with upright pride. But behind the scenes, the old wound that I had been sealing tightly opened again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the corner of the kitchen, staring at Grandma's recipe book while thinking about how Andre could so easily underestimate my efforts. The pain of being betrayed, the helplessness of losing children, and the physical exhaustion of working non-stop for 8 months finally hit me all at once. I felt very lonely. Success on television and long lines of customers didn't automatically heal the hole in my heart. I realized that my struggle all this time was a self-defense mechanism. Was busy working, so I didn't have time to feel sad. However, Andre's appearance this afternoon forced the emotion out. I think back to the days when I was a stay-at-home mom, when I celebrated my children's birthdays with decorations I made myself, and when I felt like my life was perfect before everything was ruined by Andre's lies. The next day, I had thought about not opening a stall. My body felt heavy, and my spirit seemed to be consumed by the bitter memories of yesterday. However, as I walked past the farmer's market, I saw a little child who was whining, asking his mother for snacks. That simple sight hit my consciousness. I can't stop. If I stop now, Andre wins. He would laugh because his prediction proved to be true, that I couldn't last long. I immediately washed my face, patted my own cheek, and determined to change focus. I can't constantly mourn the wounds caused by others. The wound was part of my past, but my future was in my own hands. I started cooking at a higher intensity. I didn't just follow the recipe. I put all the remaining emotions into the dish. For some reason, that day, my cooking felt sharper, more characterful, and sold very well. However, in the midst of that hustle, I realized that I was starting to experience burnout. This job demands tremendous physical stamina while my mental health is being tested. I started making small mistakes, such as misrecording orders or forgetting to include crucial spices. This is a danger. If I continue to push myself like this, I will actually ruin the reputation that I have built so hard. I decided to take a bold step. Find an assistant. All this time I did everything alone out of distrust and the desire to control every detail. However, now I realized that in order to grow, I had to learn to delegate. I put up a simple announcement in front of my stall. It didn't take long for a female student who was looking for a part-time job to apply. Her name is Sarah. He seemed dexterous and honest. The first time Sarah helped me, I felt very anxious. I always watched her every move, afraid that she would mess up Grandma's recipe. However, Sarah actually provides a new perspective. He suggested using a simple app to keep track of raw material stocks, something I've been doing manually in a cluttered notebook. She also had the idea to package food more attractively, to make it look more professional when photographed by customers for social media. Slowly, the weight on my shoulders felt lighter. Sarah's presence helped me have a little time to breathe. I started to be able to think about a long-term vision again. I was no longer just fixated on the daily money, but began to devise a more tangible expansion plan. I realized that success doesn't mean doing everything on your own, but building a sustainable system. In this process, I also began to seek professional help for my children's custody issues. I can't keep waiting. With my income starting to stabilize and the profile of my business becoming more and more public, I now have a stronger legal argument. I started consulting with a lawyer. Although the cost was expensive, I no longer saw it as a burden, but rather an investment in my family's true future. When I came home late at night after discussing the legal case with the lawyer, I felt very tired but satisfied. I was no longer a woman who just stood by at the bus stop thinking about Andrea. I have become someone who acts, someone who demands justice, and someone who dares to rebuild his future. This emotional conflict, from the anger of meeting Andre to the mental exhaustion that almost made me give up, was precisely the most important turning point in this journey. I learned that I had to forgive myself for past failures so that I could be truly free. I no longer hate Andre, because hatred will only bind me to him. I'm more focused on loving what I'm building right now. I've stared at Grandma's recipe book that was open on the table. Grandma's note there about fortitude felt more relevant than ever. I won't let the past be a burden that pulls me down. I'll make it a foothold to jump higher. Tomorrow, I'll return to that folding table with a new vision. I'm not just building a business. I'm building a way home for my kids. Every portion sold brings me closer to that goal. And now, with Sarah's help and legal plans starting to work, I feel more prepared than ever before. I no longer just survive. I'm winning back my life. Andre's past now feels like a fading shadow. My focus is completely on the big goal, having my own food truck. After successfully stabilizing operations with Sarah's help, I began to conduct a more disciplined financial audit. I cut unnecessary expenses to the most extreme degree. Every dollar that comes in, I divide into 3 parts: daily operations, legal reserve funds for child custody cases, and special savings for food trucks. My journey to find a food truck isn't as easy as flipping the palm of my hand. I spent a lot of time on online auction sites and went to various used car shows. Many of the trucks I have encountered are in terrible condition, or the prices have soared because the owners know that the food truck trend is in demand. There were times when I was almost desperate, looking at the unreasonable price of the truck while my savings grew at the speed of a snail. One afternoon, I heard the news about a small catering company that was about to close. They sell a unit of truck that has been modified with a standard kitchen. I immediately rushed to the location, even though it was quite far from the city center. When I saw the truck, my heart was instantly tethered. The body is indeed dull. The color of the paint is peeled off in some parts, but the engine still sounds powerful when started. The owner sets a fairly high price. I took a deep breath, trying to recall the courage I used when facing Andre. I started negotiating. I showed that I was a serious businessman, not just a prankster. I told you about my business journey, from folding tables to television. Either because he was impressed by the integrity I showed, or because he wanted to immediately release his assets, the owner finally agreed to give a discount. It was an emotional moment. I handed over all the dreams on wheels savings that I had accumulated by sweat for months. When the key was in hand, I felt like I was holding the key to my own freedom. This is a vehicle that will take me to pick up my children in the future. However, the real challenge has only just begun. The truck needs a complete overhaul. The electrical system had to be replaced. The kitchen interior needed to be adjusted to my health standards. And most importantly, repainted so that my business brand identity was displayed on every side. I spent 2 weeks in a carousel workshop. I didn't just supervise their work. I intervened. I learned about machines, about safe gas systems, and about how to optimize tight spaces so that I could cook freely. Sarah was very helpful to me in the old kitchen while I was busy taking care of the truck. He began to take on greater responsibility in managing orders. I realized that the delegation I learned in the previous chapter was the key to success in this phase. Without Sarah, I couldn't possibly have split my time between selling and building my dreams in the workshop. When the truck was finally finished, it looked amazing. One chose a warm yet minimalist color, in accordance with the aesthetic I envisioned. My business name is clearly written on the side in elegant but firm letters. The first time I started the truck engine, in front of the kitchen, the roar of the engine sounded like the most melodious music. It is a voice of independence. I didn't take him to the highway right away. I conducted an operational simulation for 3 days in a row. I try to cook the menu in the truck, regulate the airflow so that it doesn't overheat, and make sure each spice is arranged in an ergonomic position. I learned that cooking in a truck is much more challenging than a folding table because of limited space. I had to move with precision, almost like dancing in a tight space. The night before the launch of my first truck, I couldn't sleep. I sat in a parked truck, imagining the route I would take tomorrow. I will visit 3 different strategic locations in one day. This is a great ambition I have ever dreamed of. No more reliance on the building owner's permit or bad weather that could cancel my sale. Now, I am the one who brings the food directly to the customer. I think back to the times when I was kicked out of Andre's house. Back then, I was just carrying a suitcase and was terrified. Now, I carry a moving fleet that symbolizes determination and strength. Andre might have thought I was going to sink into ruin, but look at me now. I didn't just survive. I had evolved beyond what he had imagined. I opened Grandma's recipe book and wrote a new sentence on the last blank page. The wheels of this truck are not just a means of transportation. They are proof that no matter how far I fall, I always have the strength to make my way home on my own efforts. Tomorrow, Dawn will welcome me, not as a roadside seller, but as a mobile culinary business owner. I closed the truck door, feeling the cold of the sturdy iron in my hand. I'm ready. I no longer wait for the future. I'm picking him up. Every roar of this truck engine is a declaration of my existence. I am Mary, and I am the owner of my own destiny. Tomorrow, the city will see what a woman who never lets her dreams die can do. The first day of operating a food truck is a real test of endurance. I woke up much earlier than usual, just when the city was still asleep in the dark. I had filled the truck kitchen with fresh ingredients that Sarah had prepared the night before. I turned the ignition, and the roar of the truck's engine gave me a confidence I had never felt when selling on a folding table. The strategy I developed was no longer just to find a location, but to master the distribution map. I chose 3 strategic locations that covered different peak hours. The first location is the office area for breakfast. The second location is the central business area for lunch, and the third location is the city park area in the afternoon towards night. This is a great plan that demands high mobility and extra stamina. When I arrived at the first location, some loyal customers who knew me from the folding table immediately gave me a warm welcome. They were amazed to see the transformation I was doing. "Mary, this is a great move," said one of my regulars. The compliment gave me extra energy. I work with a rhythm that is already strong in the truck. Due to limited space, every movement must be efficient. I no longer waste energy on picking up materials that are far away. Everything is already arranged within the reach of your hand. However, a challenge arose when I moved to a second location. The traffic jams made me almost late to the predetermined point. I had to learn to navigate unusual routes, avoiding roads that were too narrow for the size of my truck. This experience taught me that having mobility does not mean being unhindered. I had to be more proactive in monitoring the road conditions and setting a schedule with a tighter time tolerance. In the second location, demand has soared. Long lines form along the sides of the truck. Sarahu is now with me in the truck end. I work like a coordinated machine. We share the task clearly. I focused on the main cooking techniques, while Sarah managed the ordering and packaging. Without Sarah, I might have been overwhelmed. We smiled at each other in the midst of the smoke of the stove and the peak busyness. This is the collaboration I dream of. A solid team in a moving fleet. A technical challenge occurred again when one of the stoves in the truck experienced a gas malfunction. Panic had ambushed, but I remembered the lesson from the carousel workshop a few weeks ago. Calmly, I turned off the main gas flow, checked the connections, and fixed it in less than 5 minutes. Customers don't even realize that there was a technical problem. I realized that this success wasn't just about cooking, but about technical mastery of the work tools I built myself. In the afternoon, when I arrived at the third location in the city park, the sun began to set a beautiful orange. The atmosphere was in stark contrast to the fatigue of the office building this afternoon. Here, customers are more relaxed. They sit in folding chairs near the truck, enjoying food while chatting. I saw satisfied faces, enjoying Grandma's recipe in the open air. I feel very peaceful. This hard struggle all day seemed to pay off when they saw their happiness. As the day ended, Sarah and I sat in the back of the truck, calculating the day's income. The numbers are incredible. However, it wasn't the money that made me rather, It was a realization of a plan that I had imagined for months. 3 locations, 3 different target markets, and all of them I can handle efficiently. I have proven that I don't need a luxurious house or financial support from Andre to be successful. I just needed this truck, Grandma's recipe, and a determination that never went out. That night, as I was cleaning the kitchen of the truck, I remembered a message from my lawyer this morning. My children's custody case is starting to get a bright spot. The supporting documents I have gathered, including evidence of business success and the life stability I have built, have given me a much better bargaining position in the eyes of the law. I almost cried. I am one step closer to bringing them home to a more stable and loving life. I stared at the streets that were starting to get quiet. In the past, this street was a place where I felt wasted and hopeless. Now, this street is the canvas for my dreams. I no longer felt afraid of Andre, because he no longer had a place in my mind. He was just a piece of a painful past, while my future was being written by me with every kilometer this truck traveled. I closed the truck door tightly. Tomorrow is a new day, and I already have plans to add a 4th location on the weekend. I won't stop. I will keep moving, keep innovating, and continue to prove that independence is the purest form of success. I am Mary, and I am the author of my own life story. I was already in full control, and I would make sure that each subsequent chapter was about victory and empowerment. That morning the air felt lighter. I no longer wake up with a suffocating anxiety or a haunting shadow of expulsion. I stood in front of my food truck, which has now become a small icon in the city. In 10 months, I have taken a journey that for many would be impossible to do alone. From $300 of savings to owning an independent fleet. From a woman who cried at a bus stop to a figure whose story inspired many people. However, today feels different. Today is not about business, but about the promises that I will keep. After a long and tiring legal process, today is the day where I will pick up my children. The lawyer told me that the judge had considered the financial stability and healthy environment I had managed to build as a compelling reason to give custody back to me. Andre no longer has any bargaining power left. His lies and manipulative attitude slowly collapsed in front of the facts I managed to gather. I decided to pick them up using my food truck. I want them to see where his mother has been struggling all along. I want them to see that even though the world had collapsed, his mother rebuilt it with her own hands. When the truck stopped in front of the house where I once lived, my heart trembled. Andre appeared in the doorway, his face looking haggard and full of...
Imagine you're lost, injured, and surrounded by danger. Suddenly a giant creature approaches you. It's stronger than you, smarter than you, and capable of hurting you. Would you trust it? For wild animals, humans often look exactly like that giant creature. Yet all over the world, remarkable moments have been captured on camera. A whale approaches divers for help. An elephant remains calm while veterinarians remove a painful injury. A trapped fox waits as rescuers cut it free. These moments raise an incredible question. Do wild animals actually know when humans are trying to help them? The answer is more complicated and more fascinating than most people realize. Wild animals are naturally cautious around humans. For millions of years, survival has depended on recognizing threats quickly. Animals that failed to avoid danger often didn't survive long enough to pass on their genes. As a result, many species are extremely sensitive to anything unusual in their environment. Sudden movements, unfamiliar sounds, direct eye contact, and close approaches can all trigger fear responses. To a deer, a wolf is dangerous. To a rabbit, a fox is dangerous. And to many wild animals, humans are simply another potential threat. This means that when a person approaches an injured animal, the animal's first reaction is often fear rather than gratitude. Even if the human is trying to help, the animal has no way of immediately knowing that. But something interesting can happen. Many animals are capable of evaluating situations as they unfold. Instead of reacting only on instinct, they can observe what happens next and adjust their behavior. Scientists call this behavioral flexibility. An animal may begin a situation frightened and defensive, but if the human's actions consistently reduce pain, stress, or danger, the animal may gradually become calmer. This doesn't necessarily mean the animal understands human kindness in the same way people do. However, it may recognize that the person is not acting like a predator, and that distinction can be incredibly important. One of the most famous examples involved a humpback whale. In 2005, divers encountered a whale tangled in heavy fishing gear. Thick ropes had wrapped around its body and restricted its movement. A rescue team carefully approached and began cutting the lines away. The operation took hours. Throughout much of the rescue, the whale remained unusually calm despite being a massive wild animal capable of injuring people accidentally with a single movement. After being freed, witnesses reported that the whale approached several rescuers before swimming away. Some believed the whale was expressing gratitude. Others argued that scientists should be cautious about interpreting the behavior. But nearly everyone agreed on one thing: the whale's response was extraordinary. Stories like this have led researchers to explore whether animals can recognize helpful actions. The evidence suggests that many species can learn through experience. If a specific action consistently produces a positive outcome, animals may begin associating that action with safety. This process is known as associative learning. It's one of the most powerful learning tools in the animal kingdom. For example, an injured bird may initially panic when approached by a wildlife rehabilitator, but after receiving food, water, and treatment repeatedly, it may become less fearful. The bird doesn't necessarily understand medicine. It simply learns that certain interactions lead to relief rather than harm. Elephants provide some of the most remarkable examples of this behavior. These animals possess exceptional memories and advanced social intelligence. Wildlife veterinarians working with injured elephants have occasionally observed individuals remaining surprisingly cooperative during treatment. Some elephants have even returned to areas where they previously received help. Researchers believe elephants may be capable of remembering both specific people and specific experiences for years. Their large brains support complex emotional and social processing. This doesn't prove they understand human intentions exactly as humans do, but it does suggest they can recognize patterns involving trust and assistance. Another fascinating case involves dolphins. Dolphins are among the most intelligent animals on Earth. They demonstrate problem-solving skills, self-recognition, and sophisticated communication abilities. There have been documented cases of dolphins approaching humans while injured or entangled in fishing equipment. In some situations, the dolphins appeared to remain near rescuers during the process, instead of fleeing immediately. Scientists believe dolphins may be particularly skilled at assessing behavior because of their advanced cognitive abilities. They are constantly evaluating members of their social groups and responding to complex interactions. This may help explain why some dolphins appear capable of tolerating human assistance under certain circumstances. Not all animals respond this way. Many wild animals remain fearful throughout an entire rescue. A hawk with an injured wing may struggle desperately while being treated. A bear rescued from a trap may remain highly defensive. A wild boar may attempt to escape at every opportunity. And that's completely normal. Fear is often the safest survival strategy. An animal doesn't need to understand human intentions to survive. In fact, excessive trust could be dangerous in the wild. This is why wildlife experts generally avoid encouraging animals to become comfortable around people. The goal is usually rehabilitation and release, not friendship. If animals become too dependent on humans, they may lose behaviors essential for survival. So while some rescue stories appear heartwarming, professionals work carefully to maintain healthy boundaries. Perhaps the most controversial question is whether animals feel gratitude. Humans experience gratitude as a complex emotional state involving memory, empathy, and social understanding. Determining whether animals experience the same emotion is extremely difficult. Scientists cannot directly ask animals what they feel. Instead, they study behavior. Some animals display actions that resemble gratitude. Rescued elephants have been observed interacting gently with caretakers. Dolphins sometimes remain near rescuers after being freed. Certain primates have shown behaviors that appear cooperative or affectionate following assistance. However, researchers remain cautious. A behavior that looks like gratitude to humans may have a different explanation. The animal might simply feel safer. It might be curious, or it might be responding to a learned association. Even so, many scientists agree that some animals experience emotional states far richer than people once believed. Research has shown that numerous species can experience fear, joy, stress, affection, grief, and social bonding. The gap between human emotions and animal emotions may not be as large as earlier generations assumed. One group of animals stands out particularly in studies of intelligence and social awareness: corvids, which include crows and ravens. These birds can recognize human faces, they can remember individuals for years, they can solve puzzles and use tools. Some experiments have shown that crows treat different humans differently based on past experiences. If a crow can remember a person who threatened it, it's reasonable to think it can also remember someone who helped it. That doesn't necessarily mean the crow understands human morality, but it does indicate a sophisticated ability to evaluate behavior. The real answer to our question may lie somewhere between instinct and understanding. Most wild animals probably do not interpret human help through concepts like kindness, compassion, or heroism. Those are deeply human ideas. But many animals can recognize patterns, they can assess danger, they can learn from experience, they can remember individuals, and in some cases they may realize that a particular human interaction is reducing their suffering rather than causing it. From the animal's perspective, that distinction may be enough. The next time you see a video of a whale waiting calmly while ropes are removed, an elephant standing still during treatment, or a fox remaining near rescuers after being freed, remember this: the animal may not understand human kindness the way we do, but it may understand something equally powerful. It may understand that in a moment of fear and pain, the creature approaching it chose not to harm it, and sometimes that may be the closest thing nature has to trust. The relationship between humans and wild animals remains one of the most extraordinary connections on Earth, and every rescue reminds us that even between different species, understanding can sometimes emerge in the most unexpected ways. One of the most astonishing stories comes from the ocean. In 2013, divers near Hawaii encountered a humpback whale in serious trouble. Fishing lines had become wrapped around its body and mouth. The whale appeared exhausted and unable to free itself. As rescuers carefully cut away the ropes, something unexpected happened. Instead of fleeing, the whale repeatedly adjusted its position, almost as if it understood the divers were trying to remove the lines. Each time a section was freed, the whale moved in a way that gave rescuers better access to the remaining ropes. After the final line was removed, witnesses reported that the whale lingered nearby before slowly swimming away. Scientists cannot prove what the whale was thinking, but many experts agreed that the animal's behavior showed an extraordinary level of awareness. Another remarkable case involved an elephant calf in Africa. The young elephant had fallen into a muddy waterhole and could not escape. Wildlife workers spent hours digging pathways and creating ramps. Throughout the rescue, the calf remained frightened, but once it realized the humans were not harming it, it gradually became less defensive. Eventually, the calf climbed to safety and reunited with its herd. The most fascinating part came afterward. Several adult elephants reportedly remained nearby, observing the rescuers from a distance. Elephants are known for their strong family bonds and high intelligence, making such encounters especially intriguing for researchers. Then there are the stories involving dolphins. Marine biologists have documented cases where injured dolphins appeared to seek assistance from boats or divers. In one instance, a dolphin approached people while tangled in fishing gear. Instead of swimming away when humans got close, it remained relatively still as the entanglement was removed. Once freed, the dolphin swam in circles around the rescuers before disappearing into deeper water. Was it gratitude? Was it curiosity? No one knows for certain. But behaviors like these continue to challenge what we think animals understand. Trust is one of the most valuable things in nature. Among animals, trust can mean the difference between life and death. A wolf must trust its pack. A chimpanzee must trust its social group. A dolphin must trust other dolphins during cooperative hunting. Because trust is so important, many animals have evolved sophisticated ways of evaluating others. This ability may extend beyond members of their own species. Researchers have found that dogs can often distinguish between helpful and unhelpful humans. Some studies suggest horses can recognize human emotions through facial expressions. Certain birds remember people who previously fed them. Even wild animals may be capable of forming temporary trust when circumstances require it. Imagine an animal trapped in a fence. Every attempt to escape causes more pain. Then a human approaches and begins removing the obstacle. The animal may initially panic, but if each action decreases discomfort instead of increasing it, the animal receives new information. Its brain starts updating its assessment of the situation. This process happens constantly throughout the animal kingdom. Animals are not merely reacting machines. Many are active decision-makers, continuously evaluating risks and opportunities. Why some rescues end badly. Not every rescue becomes a heartwarming story. Sometimes frightened animals injure rescuers. Sometimes animals flee before help can be provided. Sometimes stress becomes overwhelming despite everyone's best efforts. Wildlife professionals understand this reality better than anyone. That's why trained rescuers use specialized equipment, maintain safe distances, and carefully assess each situation. Their goal is to minimize stress while maximizing the chances of survival. An animal attacking a rescuer does not mean it is ungrateful. It simply means its survival instincts remain active. In nature, caution is often the safest choice. This is why experts repeatedly remind the public never to approach wild animals without proper training. What looks like a helpless animal may still be capable of causing serious injury. True wildlife rescue requires knowledge, patience, and respect. The biggest mistake humans make. Perhaps the biggest mistake people make is assuming animals think exactly like humans. When we see an animal looking at a rescuer, we may imagine feelings of appreciation or friendship. Sometimes that interpretation may be partly correct. Sometimes it may be completely wrong. Scientists call this anthropomorphism, the tendency to assign human emotions and motivations to animals. Anthropomorphism can help people care about wildlife, but it can also lead to misunderstandings. The truth is that animals experience the world through their own unique perspectives. A whale does not think like a human. An elephant does not think like a human. A crow does not think like a human. Yet each possesses forms of intelligence perfectly adapted to its environment. Understanding animals means appreciating those differences rather than ignoring them. Final thoughts. So, do wild animals know when humans are trying to help them? The most honest answer is sometimes, in their own way. They may not understand human kindness as a moral concept. They may not think of rescuers as heroes, but many animals can recognize when a situation becomes safer. They can learn who causes harm and who provides relief. They can remember important experiences. And in some extraordinary cases, they seem to display behaviors that look remarkably close to trust. Perhaps that is what makes wildlife rescues so powerful. For a brief moment, two completely different species overcome fear, instinct, and millions of years of separation. A frightened animal allows a human to come close. A human chooses compassion over indifference. And together, they create one of the most remarkable interactions found anywhere in nature. The next time you watch a rescue video online, pay close attention. You may be witnessing more than a simple act of survival. You may be seeing the rare moment when two worlds truly understand each other, if only for a few seconds.
Disbelief. He no longer looked arrogant. He was just a man who had just realized that he had lost the most valuable asset of his life due to his own greed. The children ran towards me. The sound of their laughter, which I could only hear in my memory, now really welcomed me. I hugged them tightly, feeling the warmth that had been lost for a long time. "Mom won't leave you again," I whispered in between happy sobs. I didn't turn my head towards Andre. He no longer deserves my attention. My full focus is on the future that is now back in my arms. We drove home to the new apartment that I had prepared. The apartment wasn't as big as Andre's old house, but it was much more comfortable and full of affection. Along the way, I told the kids about their mother's adventures on the streets, about Grandma's recipe book, and about how we were going to start a new life. They listened with admiration, as if I was the hero in their story, and to them, I am indeed a hero. That night, we cooked together in the kitchen of the apartment. I used Grandma's recipe, the same recipe that saved me when I was at the lowest point. The aroma of the cuisine fills the room, creating a warm and peaceful atmosphere of the house. I saw my children eating the dish voraciously, and for the first time in a long time, I felt that my life was completely complete. I realized that true success is not about the material wealth that Andre has robbed, but rather about the fortitude of soul. I have proven that self-reliance is the strongest foundation. If I hadn't experienced that bitter divorce, maybe I would never have known what power was really stored within me. That experience, as painful as it was the best teacher who forced me to grow. I sat at the dining table, looking at my children who were fast asleep after getting tired of playing. I opened Grandma's recipe book for the last time. On the last sheet, I wrote a cover. God does not close one door, except to open another, wider one. Life's recipe is not about perfect ingredients, but rather about how brave we are in the face of the fire that burns us. My business has now grown into more than just a food truck. I started planning for a permanent physical store opening, and would hire more people who needed the opportunity. Just like Sarah helped me through the difficult times, I want to make an impact for others, making sure that everyone who struggles has a place to stand on. I stood on the balcony of the apartment, looking at the shining city lights down there. I am no longer the frightened Mary. I am Mary who has won her own inner war. I have rebuilt my whole, piece by piece, from ashes and destruction. I no longer waited for the future, because it was now sleeping soundly in my room. Andre is just a past that no longer has control over me. He has taught me a lesson about what I don't want to be, while my struggles have given me answers about who I really am. I took a deep breath, feeling the fresh night air. I am ready for tomorrow, and for all the days that we will go through together as a whole and strong family. This story is no longer about loss, but about rediscovering oneself. And this chapter is the happiest chapter I've ever written in my life.